He forgot our anniversary. But I still set the table. Because some silences deserve a reply. I ironed the napkins. The blue linen ones with the stitched corners, the ones we only used once a year. I placed them carefully folded just so. Then adjusted the silverware. Twice. The herb-baked salmon had been in the oven for 20 minutes too long. I lowered the heat. Checked the clock. 10:07. The playlist was already halfway through. Norah Jones, Etta James. Old jazz that still smelled like our wedding night. Still filled the kitchen like it used to fill his smile. I wore the blue velvet dress, the one he used to love, the one he once said made me look like midnight. Back when midnight still meant something soft. Not lonely. The dress still fit. But I didn't feel like elegance. I felt like goodbye. I lit the candles. 2 of them. White short, drugstore cheap. They melted unevenly, one faster than the other. Just like us. The wine sat open on the table. Cabernet, his favorite. I poured 2 glasses and waited. My phone buzzed once. A text from Naomi, happy anniversary. Is he spoiling you tonight? I stared at the screen. Typed he's almost home. Lie number 1. I turned the phone over, screen down, then folded the napkin again. And waited. The food turned lukewarm. The house smelled like time and silence. The clock ticked. The candles burned low. And still, I waited. It was nearly midnight when I heard the door unlock. No rush. No keys fumbled. No apologies carried on breathless footsteps. Just a slow practice turn of the knob, like someone arriving exactly when they meant to. I didn't move. Didn't speak. The candles had already drowned into waxy puddles. Dinner sat cold and untouched. 2 wine glasses, both empty because I drank both. He stepped into the hallway, loosened his tie with one hand. His shoes made no sound against the rug. But the scent arrived before him, not cologne, not hospital sanitizer. Gin. And something sweet, floral, hotel soap. The kind wrapped in stiff white paper like it wants to pretend it's luxury. He glanced toward the dining table. Then to me. Briefly. Long day, he said. That was it. No smile. No, I'm sorry. Not even a glance that lingered. Just those 2 words, like they were enough to explain it all. He walked past me like I wasn't there, headed toward the bedroom. I followed. Not to accuse. Not to scream. I didn't have the energy for fireworks. I only had one question. He was standing by the dresser, unbuttoning his shirt, still not looking at me. Where were you? I asked it gently. Almost like I was asking about the weather. He paused. Gave a tired shrug. Didn't turn around. It's just a date, Vanessa. Don't be dramatic. I felt the words like wind through a cracked window. Cold, dismissive, expected. He pulled off his shirt. Dropped it onto the chair. That's when I saw it. The faintest smudge on the collar. Pink. Not my shade, too soft. Too young. Too recent. He didn't notice me noticing. Or maybe, he just didn't care. The silence between us stretched thin, but still I didn't break it. He slipped under the covers. Back turned. Breath even like nothing had happened. And me, I just stood there. By the doorway. In a dress no one remembered. On a night he'd erased. Trying to remember when I stopped being seen. I lay beside him that night. Motionless. Eyes wide open in the dark. Listening to the quiet rhythm of his breath. He always slept easy. Even when things were falling apart. My fingers traced the seam of the pillowcase, my body barely sinking into the mattress. I could feel the space between us like a cold draft. It used to be filled with laughter. Now it was filled with nothing. No kiss goodnight, no hand reaching for mine. Just absence. In the form of a man who still lived in our house. I turned to face him, but all I saw was the back of his head. The soft rise and fall of someone who had long stopped wondering how I felt. Or maybe he never did. And that's when I realized it wasn't an affair I feared most. It was invisibility. being erased one silent night at a time. I stared at the ceiling, counted each exhale. Thought about the version of me he used to love, the girl in the velvet dress, the woman who stayed up waiting, the one who believed showing up was enough to keep someone. But love doesn't leave bruises. Not the kind you can point to, it leaves questions. And long pauses. And the slow death of words like us. At 3:08 a.m. I slipped out of bed. Feet bare, heart heavy. I walked into the kitchen. The candles had hardened. The salmon sat in the trash. My reflection blinked back at me from the microwave door. Tired, still, forgotten. I poured myself a glass of water and didn't drink it. Just held it like it might fill the silence if I gripped it tight enough. Sometimes I wondered, what would happen if I disappeared? If I didn't refill his coffee? If I stopped folding his shirts? If I stopped saying good morning? Would he notice? Would anything change? The cruelest kind of abandonment isn't loud. It's not slammed doors or shouted curses. It's staying but not seeing. It's brushing past your wife on your anniversary like she's furniture. And I'd finally stopped mistaking that for marriage. The morning after felt too quiet. Like the house knew something had cracked. Even the coffee pot sputtered slower than usual. I stood by the sink watching steam curl up from my mug. My hands wrapped around the ceramic like it might anchor me to the moment. He was still asleep. Or pretending to be. I didn't check. I walked past the hallway mirror without looking. But something made me stop. Not curiosity. Not vanity. Just a need to remember what I looked like when I wasn't pretending. The mirror didn't lie. It caught me in a way the light usually didn't. My shoulders curved inward like I was apologizing for taking up space. My eyes, they looked like they'd stopped asking to be seen. The woman staring back at me wasn't weak. She was worn, frayed at the edges like a favorite sweater no one reaches for anymore. Still soft, still holding warmth, but overlooked. I reached up and touched my face. Not to fix anything, just to feel something. The lipstick from last night still clung faintly to the edges of my mouth. The blue velvet dress hung on the back of the bedroom door. Not dirty, not wrinkled, just unused. That was the word that landed hardest. Unused. Not unloved, not betrayed, just shelved. Like a book he once adored but no longer had time to read. I whispered something, barely a breath. Is this it? Not to him. Not to the house. But to myself. To the version of me that still held on to anniversaries and playlists and candlelight. The mirror didn't answer. But it didn't have to. It showed me what I'd refused to name for months. That the distance between us wasn't growing, it had already arrived. That evening I set the table again. Not for him. Not for an anniversary. Just to see what it felt like to do something for myself. One plate. One glass. One cloth napkin folded like always. I roasted a small chicken, nothing fancy. Just something that smelled like warmth. Like home if home hadn't become a waiting room. I played music. Not our playlist. Mine, Nina Simone. Piano heavy, sad but not broken. Like someone who knew loss, and still sang anyway. I sat by the window while it cooked, watching the way evening light hit the floorboards. The way it always had. Even when I stopped noticing. When the timer dinged, I didn't rush. I moved slowly, deliberately. As if I were learning how to live inside my own life again, I poured one glass of wine, took one bite, and let the silence sit beside me like a friend instead of a threat. He didn't come home that night. No text. No call. No lie rehearsed, just enough to pass for truth. And for the first time I didn't flinch. I cleared the plate, washed the glass, wiped the counter clean. Then I went to the bedroom, took the blue velvet dress off the hook, and packed it away, not in bitterness, but in finality. It wasn't a costume anymore, it was a memory. I crawled into bed alone, but not lonely. I didn't stare at the door. I didn't listen for footsteps. I just pulled the blanket over my shoulders and whispered to the dark. No more waiting. That night, I didn't mourn a man. I mourned the woman I used to be when she still believed effort was enough. And when I slept, I dreamed of something I hadn't in months. Peace, not because he left, but because I finally let go. Suspicion didn't arrive with a bang. It showed up like fog. Soft, thin, everywhere. I didn't check his phone, didn't trail him down the street, didn't sniff his shirts or mark the calendar. I just noticed. The way his car always had exactly 39 more miles than it should have. The way his keys clinked just once, when he came in, no shuffle, no pause, no second thought. He stopped asking what I wanted for dinner. Stopped glancing at my reflection when we walked past glass. Stopped saying goodnight with anything behind it. And I stopped hoping that silence meant peace. It didn't. It meant absence wearing the mask of politeness. November came colder than usual. The kind of cold that crept in through window frames even when they were shut tight. One morning, I found a receipt on the passenger seat. Not hidden. Not shoved away, just there. Like it wasn't meant to be remembered. A florist. Downtown. $124.75. Peonies and white ranunculus. That wasn't my bouquet, that wasn't my birthday. I folded it once. Then again. Then tucked it into the side pocket of my purse where it stayed like a pulse. A few days later, his phone buzzed while he was in the shower. Just one message. No name. Just still thinking about your laugh. I didn't touch it, didn't unlock, didn't scream. I just looked at that line, burned it into my brain, and whispered the reply he never saw. So am I. Because it had been weeks, maybe months, since I heard that laugh too. And it wasn't mine anymore. It started with the shoes. Red heels, bright, pointed. Unapologetic. I saw them before I saw her. Standing beside Logan's car in the far corner of the employee lot, the one only managers used. She leaned in just slightly, like she knew her shadow belonged there. One hand rested on the driver's side door. The other touched her collar, adjusting something that didn't need adjusting. She wore a cream blazer, black pants, hair pinned up like she practiced how it fell when she turned to laugh. She laughed. And Logan, he smiled. Not the quick, polite kind he gave nurses in the hallway. Not the tight-lipped version he gave me at breakfast. But something loose. Familiar, warm. I stayed in my car, driver's window cracked. His dry cleaning still on the seat beside me. He didn't see me. He wasn't supposed to. I hadn't told him I was coming by. I just thought maybe a nice surprise. Maybe he forgot his umbrella. But he wasn't alone. And it wasn't raining. She brushed something off his shoulder. A leaf. A thread. Too tender. Too practiced. He didn't flinch. Didn't step back. He let her fingers linger. My hand found the hanger on the seat, knuckles tight, but I didn't get out. Didn't wave. Didn't smile, I just watched. Counted the seconds. Noted the way she tilted her head like she'd tilted it before. Then I drove off. Dry cleaning still beside me. Heart buzzing like a low-voltage wire under my skin. That night I didn't mention her. Didn't ask who wore red heels in the parking lot. Didn't say a word. I just placed the clean shirts into his closet. Hung the blue Oxford last. And whispered to myself. She knows where to stand. And I know what I saw. At Thanksgiving, his mother made the casserole. She always did, the one with sweet potatoes, marshmallows, and toasted pecans. The scent filled the dining room before anyone sat down. I wore a soft burgundy sweater. Pearl studs. A necklace Logan once brought back from Atlanta. Said it reminded him of my quiet, but he didn't look twice. She did. Delilah Hayes. That was her name, now finally spoken aloud, not DH. On a Bluetooth. Not a client's assistant. Not a woman in red heels laughing by his car. Just Delilah. Introduced as a colleague helping with the Q4 strategy realignment, she arrived with a bottle of wine. Australian. Too expensive for a work friend. She greeted his father with both hands. Kissed his mother's cheek. And sat next to Logan. Not across. Not diagonally. Right next. Her blazer today was ivory. Her nails perfect plum. Lipstick coral. Again. I recognized it now. Same shade I wiped from the passenger visor last month. The smudge that didn't match anything I owned. The one I'd almost convinced myself was mine. She laughed too loud at his father's dry story about golf carts and lost balls. Reached across Logan's plate for the salt. Touched his sleeve like it was hers to adjust. He didn't pull back. He didn't look at me either. Not once. I passed the cranberry sauce. Smiled when Delilah said she loved my earrings. Thanked her for the wine. Told her Logan and I used to drink the same brand years ago. She just smiled. And under the table my fingers curled against my napkin. Later that night, the scent of her perfume still clung to his jacket. Peony and something citrusy sharp, young not me. I folded it anyway. Hung it back in his closet. And added a new note in the drawer I no longer used for grocery lists. The 24th of November, coral lipstick. Peony. Touch on shoulder, no denial. Naomi called at 9:42 p.m. I was standing in the kitchen rinsing dishes I didn't remember eating off of. Hot water, lemon soap. A chipped plate still usable, kind of like me. I saw Delilah in your husband's company story, she said without preamble. No warm-up, no soft entry. She was wearing that cream blazer. Standing next to Logan. Looking like she belonged. I gave a short laugh. Not because it was funny, but because I was too tired to cry. Maybe you're reading into it, I said quietly, even though I knew I wasn't. Naomi didn't pause. She never did when it mattered. Vanessa, she said, her voice low but firm, you're not crazy. I stared at the sink water still running. You keep editing yourself to make him look better, she continued. You shrink your gut instincts down to fit his explanations. That's not loyalty. That's survival. I didn't answer. The dishwasher hummed. The air still smelled like cinnamon and leftovers. Naomi waited. I wanted to say something, anything. But all I managed was, I'm just tired. She softened but didn't retreat. That's because pretending takes energy, she said. And you've been doing it alone. I wiped my hands on a towel that used to be white. Stared at the floor like it had answers. You think it's noble to stay quiet, to give him space. To be patient, Naomi said gently. But he's not confused, Vanessa, he's just unchecked. That word landed heavy. Unchecked. Like a door left ajar long enough for someone else to step through. I don't want to be bitter, I whispered. Then don't be, she said. Be clear, I didn't promise anything. But that night, for the first time in weeks, I didn't replay Logan's voice in my head as I fell asleep. I replayed Naomi's. And it felt like truth with a hand on my shoulder. I told myself I was just running errands. Needed coffee, needed air, needed anything except sitting in that house where love used to live. The cafe in Logan's office building had a new seasonal drink. Vanilla chai with maple foam. Too sweet, too soft. But I ordered it anyway. I sat by the window. Black coat. Hair tucked in, invisible. She walked in 5 minutes later. Delilah. Alone. No coat, just that cream blazer again. Like it was part of her skin now. She didn't look around. Didn't order anything. She moved with a kind of certainty that made me feel erased. She headed straight to a corner booth, heels clicking like punctuation. Then the voice smooth. Polished. Loud enough to cut through the hum of jazz. I'm telling you, she said, phone to her ear, a few more weeks and I won't have to hide anymore. She paused. Tucked her hair behind her ear. Smiled. He's already planning the exit, he said. She's passive. Quiet. Won't make a fuss. I didn't breathe. Didn't blink. The maple foam curdled in my cup. She's a good woman, Delilah added, almost amused. But she's tired. And tired women don't fight. They fold. She laughed. And I finally believed her. Because that's how I'd felt for months, folded. Filed away. Put in a drawer with wedding photos and used to be. She left 10 minutes later. Didn't see me, didn't know I was there. But I saw her. And I heard everything. I didn't go home. I went to my car. Saturday in the driver's seat, engine off, notes app open. Title: things I can't unsee. Red heels, cream blazer. Coral lipstick on his visor, her hand on his shoulder. My name on nothing. Her voice saying Mrs. Monroe. The way he doesn't look at me. The way I stopped looking back. I didn't cry. Didn't scream. I typed. Line by line. Memory by memory. Because even if no one else believed me, even if Logan kept brushing me off, I had receipts now. Not in drawers. Not in my head, but in writing. The screen lit my face in the dark. I stared at it for a long time. Then I whispered, I see it now, and I did. Not just them, but me. And I wasn't invisible anymore. The night after Thanksgiving, I didn't sleep. The guest room still smelled like her perfume. Sweet, heavy, artificial. Logan said it was from the candles Naomi lit. But I'd bought those candles. They didn't smell like her. I stood in the kitchen at 2 a.m., one hand on the counter, the other gripping a mug of cold tea I hadn't touched. Naomi's laugh echoed in my memory. So loud, so comfortable. So permanent. She'd left behind her red scarf draped over the arm of our couch like a careless flag. I didn't move it. I wanted Logan to see it too. To trip over it. To choke on the memory of her presence. But he didn't say a word about it, not even when he passed it on the way to the fridge. Not even when I wrapped it in tissue and laid it on our entry table. The silence between us wasn't cold, it wasn't loud. It was leftover. Like the dishes in the sink after guests leave. Like lipstick on a glass someone forgot to wash. And the worst part, he still kissed me goodnight. Still smiled like he wasn't unraveling everything I thought we were. Do you know how it feels? To look into someone's eyes and realize they've already looked through you. That they've already moved on while you're still standing there holding what's left. What would you do if your gut screamed she's in the one? But he swore you were crazy. Do you wait for the truth or walk before it shatters you? The first time I met Naomi, she was wearing a yellow dress and crying over a man who didn't deserve her. That was 7 years ago. At a wine bar downtown. Back when we both still believed love meant giving second chances. She taught me how to look people in the eye when I lied. Taught me how to keep a straight face when the truth would ruin everything. And now she was the only one who didn't lie to me. When I told her about Delilah's laugh, about the lipstick, about the way Logan's voice turned soft when he said her name, she didn't flinch. Vanessa, she said like she'd been waiting to say it for months, you're always the last to know. The words didn't sting. They split something open. Because deep down I already knew. Not just about Delilah. But about every moment I'd chosen to turn away. Every lie I wrapped in politeness. Every time I let Logan's silence count as an answer. Naomi didn't ask if I was okay. She knew better. She just passed me a glass of wine and said, start writing it all down. You won't trust your memory later. But paper doesn't gaslight. So I did. I opened a new page in notes. Title: the things he called me before he stopped. Soft, smart, beautiful, too much, too quiet, needy, crazy. It was all there. In his voice, in the pauses between. And that night I finally let myself say it out loud, I think he's replacing me. Naomi didn't say no, he wouldn't. She said, then make sure you're irreplaceable in your own damn story. I didn't wear black, I wore beige. The color of neutrality. Of don't notice me. Of women who ask questions without being seen as threats. The receptionist barely glanced up. Name, she asked, typing with one hand. Marilyn Fair, I said. It wasn't a lie. It was a version of me that could walk into a law office without shaking. The folder in my hand had bent corners, smudged ink pages that smelled like printer heat and regret. Inside, one hotel confirmation from Charleston. 2 bank statements. 3 screenshots from an iCloud backup Logan thought I didn't know existed, and a list I'd written in my own handwriting, things that don't add up. At the bottom of the list, I'd underlined one phrase twice, credit line in my name. The room where Miles Thorne sat was quiet. He didn't smile. Didn't offer tissues. Didn't ask how I was. He just looked at me. Waited. Like a surgeon staring at a scan. Like someone who had seen this before but still took it seriously. "You're not here for revenge," he said after the first 10 pages. "You're here for recovery." That word, recovery. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear it. Not retaliation, not scandal. Just reclaiming something that used to belong to me. Like my name. Like my peace. Like my right to not be deceived quietly in rooms I paid for. Miles flipped a page, nodded slowly. "There's enough here to start." And just like that, my silence became strategy. It wasn't the grand mirror in the bedroom, not the one with ornate edges where I used to check my earrings before dinner parties we no longer hosted. No, it was the small rectangular one chipped at the corner, hanging slightly crooked above the laundry cabinet. I had once used it to double-check if detergent had splashed on my sweater. Now it saw something else. It saw me standing barefoot, folding Logan's shirts with mechanical grace and pausing as the scent hit. Not mine, peony. With a touch of bergamot. Too crisp, too feminine, too intentional. I turned the shirt over. Pale blue. Same one he wore to the holiday dinner. The collar still creased from dry cleaning, except now it held proof. Not dramatic, not smeared lipstick or perfume drenched. Just enough to whisper. Enough to say she was close enough to press in. And that's when I saw the mirror. My own face. Expressionless. Except the eyes. The eyes told the truth. They said you already knew. They said you don't need him to confess. I picked up the pen from beside the fabric softener. Opened the notepad I kept for grocery lists. Wrote the 10th of December, pale blue shirt, peony. Bergamot. Not mine. Then I folded the shirt. And added bleach. Not out of spite. Not to destroy. But because I didn't want to carry her scent into another day of pretending. And that mirror, the one by the detergent, caught my gaze one last time as I shut the washer. It didn't flinch. Neither did I. Miles didn't shake my hand when I stood to leave. He just slid an envelope across the desk. White. Unassuming. Unlabeled. "Just the basics," he said. "Documents to review when you're ready. No rush." I nodded. Not because I understood everything, but because I didn't need to. I would read every word that night in the quiet, with the kettle humming behind me and Logan asleep in a house he no longer shared with me. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, but I carried it with both hands. Like a truth too long postponed. Down the hallway, carpeted in gray, lined with quiet doors that had seen things like this before. I passed a woman sitting on the bench outside Miles's office. Mid-60s maybe. Shoulders trembling. Wedding rings still on. Her eyes met mine for a second. And something unspoken passed between us, not pity, not solidarity. Just understanding. I didn't stop, but I didn't look away. Because maybe I wasn't the only one who had learned how to disappear from her own life quietly. But maybe I'd be the first to exit without begging for an apology. Back in my car, the engine idled without moving. I placed the envelope on the passenger seat. Next to it, my phone. I opened notes. Typed Friday. 9:15 a.m. Deliver file. Start over. Then I looked in the rearview mirror. And for the first time, I saw a woman I recognized, not as his wife, not as someone broken, but as someone still standing. Not waiting. Not weeping. Just ready. Some exits don't need slamming doors. Just a woman who knows where she's headed and a key that no longer fits the lock. It was a Friday when his card declined. Not at a gas station. Not at some grocery store. It happened at Ventura, the wine bar where he used to take me back when we still had anniversaries worth celebrating. The maitre d' had already brought out a bottle. Imported. Hand-selected by their sommelier according to Delilah's post. I didn't know he was there until the notification came in. My banking app pinged. Transaction declined $183.42, Ventura Lounge. 2 seconds later, his name popped up. Logan Monroe Mobile. Hey, did you change something with the card trying to pay, and it's acting weird? I didn't reply right away. I let the moment sit. Let him sweat. Then I typed back slow measured. Might be the bank. They've been running routine checks lately. He sent a thumbs up. Didn't press. Didn't ask more. Because he still thought everything was under his name. He didn't know I'd been the one holding the strings since year one. The main account, the one that held our savings, our stocks, the line he always used to book business hotels, was mine. Set up under my name the week after we got married. I had let him be a joint user just like I let him believe he was in control. What he used tonight was the dependent card I had quietly flagged for review 2 weeks ago. What he didn't know was that I'd already stripped all his access. Changed the login. Set alerts for any transaction over $1. He could still swipe. Still smile. Still play the role of charming husband with the expensive taste and the harmless work dinners. But every time he did, I would see it, in real time. Like a GPS for betrayal. And the best part, he thought I was still asleep at home making grocery lists and organizing laundry by fabric type. He had no idea I was at a different table, no wine, no candlelight, just a laptop, a spreadsheet, and a list of every asset with my initials quietly reattached. That night, he drank half a bottle of Bordeaux he couldn't afford. And I toasted myself. With water. Cold, clean. And paid for by my own name. It was a friend who sent the photo. Not Naomi. Not anyone I'd confided in. Just a mutual from Logan's hospital fundraiser circle, someone who still hadn't picked sides because she didn't know there were sides to pick. The text came in at 8:47 p.m. Thought you'd want to see this. Your husband looks good tonight. Saudi attached was a picture. Dim lighting. Amber candles, the soft blur of wine glasses and white linen. And him, Logan, in his navy jacket. The one I bought him for our 6th anniversary. Still wearing it like he earned it. And next to him, Delilah. Hair curled, red dress. Leaning in with a hand on his chest like she already had the keys to our front door. He was smiling. That smile. The one he used to save for me when I walked in wearing heels or surprised him with lemon cake on a Wednesday. He wasn't just smiling, he was glowing, lit from the inside out. The way a man glows when he thinks no one who matters is watching. I sat still, phone in hand. Eyes tracing the curve of his posture, the way his fingers rested near hers, not quite touching, but close. So close. He hadn't looked at me like that in over a year, maybe longer. And yet there he was looking at her like she was some secret he couldn't wait to unwrap. For a second my thumb hovered over the photo. I almost deleted it. Almost told myself it was nothing. A fundraiser. A work thing. But no. This wasn't corporate, this wasn't professional. This wasn't accidental closeness. This was practiced. This was familiar. This was confirmation. I saved the photo. Tagged it in a private folder I'd named months ago Quiet Evidence. I didn't forward it to Naomi. Didn't confront him. Didn't cry. I just stared until the image was burned into the back of my eyes, until I could look at him in person and no longer wonder what he looked like when he smiled for someone else. When I got home, everything was dark, not dim. Not cozy. But dark, the kind of dark that makes you pause before reaching for a switch. I flicked one on. Nothing. The hallway. Nothing. Kitchen. Still nothing. At first I thought power outage. Storm maybe. Breaker tripped. But the fridge hummed quietly. The Wi-Fi box blinked green. The oven clock still read 9:12. Only the lights were gone. Just the bulbs. Unscrewed from every room like someone had decided I didn't need to see anymore. I opened the drawer where we kept backups. Empty. The flashlight under the sink missing. Even the tiny one clipped inside my purse gone. I stood there staring at the bare ceiling fixtures, my hands suddenly colder than the air. It wasn't just absence, it was intentional. That's what hit hardest. Not the darkness, but the knowing. He had been here. And he'd taken something I never thought to protect light. It was theatrical, strategic. The kind of move you make when you want someone to feel disoriented but not broken. Powerless but still functional enough to keep quiet. I didn't call him. Didn't text. I lit a candle I found in the guest bathroom, the one from our wedding gift basket. Still vanilla. Still tacky. Still barely enough to cut the dark. Then I sat at the dining table, folder of documents in my lap, and opened to the page with my forged signature on a credit application for a necklace I'd never seen. The candle flickered beside me, my eyes adjusted. And I realized he hadn't taken the light. He just underestimated how much I'd already learned to see in the dark. He always remembered to clear his texts, to wipe call logs, to label her name as a client. But Logan forgot one thing. The cloud. It happened by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was uploading receipts for the divorce attorney Miles wanted timestamps, proof of spending. So I opened our shared drive, the one we used to store tax forms and vacation photos. I didn't expect to find anything new. But there it was. A folder. Buried under Q4 proposals. Named dossiers lowercase. A slip. He never used lowercase. Inside were photos. Not spreadsheets, not pitch decks. Just her. Delilah. Smiling in a mirror with his shirt on, curled into his chest at what looked like a Vineyard Charleston maybe. I recognized the railing from a photo he once sent me, her fingers in his hair, her wine glass by his laptop, her shoes kicked off beside our guest room throw blanket. Some photos had timestamps. One taken on our anniversary. The night he said he had a bored dinner. I didn't cry. I didn't even blink, I just clicked. One by one. Each image sharper than the last. Then I saw a scanned receipt. From a boutique hotel. Room service ordered at 1:07 a.m. strawberries champagne, and one note handwritten to the woman who makes me believe again. His handwriting. Not for me. There was a second document beneath it. A reservation confirmation for Valentine's Day. 2 months from now. A beachfront suite. Booked in advance, in her name. Charged to my card. He hadn't just forgotten to lock a folder. He had forgotten I still had access. He had forgotten who paid for the drive, who set up the account, who knew the answers to every security question. Mother's maiden name, my mother. First car, my idea. Favorite city. Ours until it wasn't. I closed the laptop slowly like it might burn my fingers. Then reached for my phone and opened the shared bank portal. One transfer, then another. Then I revoked his access. By the time he smiled at her again, he'd be smiling broke. I didn't need revenge. I needed memory. Sharp. Clear. Unshakable. I remembered every night I forgave too easily. Every apology I rehearsed before he walked through the door. Every time I made myself smaller so he could feel like the man of the house. He thought I'd forget. That silence meant erasure. That stillness meant surrender. But I wasn't the woman who screamed in public. I was the woman who documented. Who archived. Who traced lies back to receipts and timestamps. To hotel logins and last-minute dry cleaning runs. He didn't notice when the joint account froze, when the automatic payments failed, when his gym membership was declined, but I did. I watched the notifications pile up, quiet victories in the form of bounced emails. Naomi once said, "You don't need to break him, you just need to make him irrelevant." And that's exactly what I did. No screaming, no warnings. Just erasing him from every system he thought he controlled. I changed passwords. Moved stocks. Called the CPA. Reclaimed the house deed. Piece by piece I became a woman who didn't flinch. The last thing I did, I packed one box. Not his. Mine. My books. My copy of The Art of War. The blue velvet dress, not because it reminded me of him, but because it reminded me of who I was before I bent. I didn't leave a note. Just the empty space where I used to wait. The door didn't slam. It closed quietly. And somewhere behind it, a man who smiled at the wrong woman with the wrong assumptions about the one who would never forget. He thought I'd forget, but I was built to remember. And now the next move was mine. The first time I saw them together in public, he was wearing that smile. The one he used to give me across the kitchen counter with coffee, breath, and morning scruff. The one that used to mean I see you. Now it was hers. They were across the street from my bank. She had one hand curled around his elbow, the other clutching a tiny coffee cup like she was in some Hallmark movie. Laughing at something he said, or maybe just laughing because she thought she'd won. He looked lighter. Like betrayal came with better posture. Like forgetting me gave him energy. And her Delilah wore sunglasses too big for her face, a scarf I'd seen once in our guest closet, and lipstick the exact shade I scrubbed off his collar 3 months ago. I didn't cross the street. I didn't run. I just stood there, watching the man I used to love smile at the woman he thought I'd never confront. He didn't see me, but I saw everything. The slight lean, the thumb brushing her wrist, the familiarity, the performance. It wasn't love. It was ownership. The kind that only works when the other woman believes you're gone for good. That day I didn't cry. I didn't spiral. I walked into the bank. Changed my last name on every document. Not back to my maiden name, but to the name I chose. My name. Not his, not ours. Just mine. The teller blinked. "Congratulations," she said, handing me the new card. I nodded. "Thank you," I replied. "And tell your manager the fraud alert worked perfectly." Because yes, his last little trick had bounced. One final failed attempt to pull from the account he didn't know was already closed. He gave her the smile. I took back the legacy. The florist called me first. She thought she was doing me a favor. "Hi, Mrs. Monroe, just confirming the delivery for today, a white orchid arrangement, and your note." I paused. My note. My voice was steady, but my fingers curled into the edge of the kitchen counter. "Yes, the one you requested for the hotel suite, room 719, it just says, to the next chapter, a beat. Do you want to add a signature?" I didn't laugh. I didn't scream. I just said cancel it, and hung up. He was sending her my flowers. With my name. Using my money. He really thought I'd let him script a love story on the ruins of my name. But the florist wasn't the only one who called. The jeweler came next. "Hello, just confirming Mrs. Monroe's authorization for the ring resizing. He said you might want to add an engraving." I didn't need to ask what kind of ring. I just said number. I want a copy of the receipt. And the account used. And there it was. The same closed card. The one tied to my name. He hadn't just tried to claim me. He was using the shadow of our marriage to fund a proposal to someone else. How poetic. He gave her my flowers. He bought her a ring with a name he didn't earn. He was planning a life with the last pieces of the woman he thought was still too quiet to stop him. But I wasn't just stopping him. I was documenting everything. The florist. The jeweler, the receipts, the audio recordings. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a case. And I was no longer the wife. I was the witness. He thought he could replace me with a bouquet and a borrowed ring. He forgot I own the name on the account. And the one on the subpoena. I saw the photos before anyone sent them. Public polished posed. Delilah in white. Not a wedding gown, but close. Cream silk. A little too bridal for someone claiming she was just his future. And Logan beside her, hand low on her back, the same way he used to guide me into parties like I was something worth protecting. They stood in front of the Symphony Hall, some charity gala she'd bragged about in whispers, while I sat silent across cafe tables. Her caption said, "Finally stepping into the light." 3 heart emojis, and a diamond. The comments poured in. "You two are meant to be power couple energy. Love always finds its way." I didn't comment. Didn't even click like. I just watched. Watched as she celebrated a man who had used my login to buy her the shoes she was wearing. watched as she took the stage in a spotlight she thought I still wanted. But the truth, I had already left that theater. No curtain call. No final bow. I had already packed the programs, swept the confetti, and rewritten the script. Let her play the lead now. Let her stand center stage. Because I knew something she didn't. The applause never lasts when the whole show was a lie. She thought the spotlight was hers, but the stage was crumbling and the exit door already had my fingerprints on it. The first time I didn't flinch when someone said Mrs. Monroe was at the pharmacy. The tech called it out loud, chipper, unaware. And I just stood there. Still, no blink. No reaction. Because it didn't feel like mine anymore. That name had started to sound like a forwarded message I never opened. A voicemail from someone I no longer lived with. Familiar but no longer belonging. I used to sign it on holiday cards, place cards, loan documents, tax returns. Now I didn't even sign the back of the envelope when I mailed in the request for reinstating my maiden name. The clerk at the DMV asked if I was sure. I am, I said, and I was. Because there was something freeing about seeing your own name again after years of being a footnote to someone else's narrative. The old monogrammed tote, the one with VM stitched in gold thread, I donated it. The bathrobe with our initials gone. I wasn't erasing a marriage. I was reclaiming a person. Every time I typed my full name now, it felt like breathing. Like remembering a version of myself that existed before soft apologies and half-truths made me question my own voice. Naomi texted when she saw the name update on LinkedIn. "You look more like you again," she wrote. I didn't reply. Because she was right. And because the version of me she was talking about, the one who didn't answer to silence or shrink to keep the peace, was already standing taller. The name he gave me came with weight. The one I chose for myself came with wings. It wasn't a grand moment. No confetti, no champagne. Just the soft hush of clean sheets and a room that smelled like lavender and nothing else. I didn't plan to sleep through. I didn't even notice it was happening. There was no staring at the ceiling, no listening for footsteps that never came. No checking my phone to see if silence had turned into goodbye. I just slept. And when I woke, the sun had already crept in, painting soft stripes across the wall. I blinked, confused by the light and by how calm I felt. No knots in my chest, no ache behind my eyes. Just breath. Steady, deep, uninterrupted breath. I reached over out of habit, but the other side of the bed was cool and untouched. Not lonely, not empty. Just mine. And that was the difference. It wasn't about having someone next to me. It was about the peace of not waiting for someone who'd already left in all the ways that mattered. I made coffee without rushing. Let the shower's steam fog the mirror while I hummed a song I didn't recognize, but my body knew it was safe to sing. I watered the plant in the kitchen, the one that Logan said was dying anyway, and smiled when I saw a tiny new leaf unfurling. Naomi called, and for the first time in weeks I let it go to voicemail. Not because I didn't want to talk, but because nothing was urgent anymore. Not today. Today I had nothing to defend. Nothing to decode, nothing to brace for. Just sunlight, a second cup of coffee, and the quiet luxury of being alone in a life I didn't have to explain. Have you ever had that one morning where your breath didn't carry someone else's name? Tell me what freedom looked like for you. I'll be here reading every word. The first night in the new place, I didn't unpack everything. I didn't light candles. Didn't hang pictures. Didn't play music to fill the silence. Because for once the silence didn't ache. It just was. A soft hum. A clean break. No apologies tangled in the air. No footsteps that skipped my side of the hallway. Just the refrigerator clicking on. The floor beneath me solid and mine. I didn't even cry. I just sat on the floor, legs crossed, tea cooling in my hands, and let the quiet introduce itself. The apartment was small. 3rd floor. No elevator. White curtains that let in too much light in the morning and not enough at night. But nothing in it was broken. No burnt-out light bulbs, no locked drawers I didn't have keys to. No receipts shoved under furniture. No man who wore love like a costume he could unzip when it got inconvenient. I'd bought a new mug. Just one. Seafoam green. Wide brim. Heavy in the palm like it knew it had to carry more than coffee. Some mornings I brewed chamomile just to hold it, just to feel the weight of something that didn't lie. Naomi called on the second day. No questions. Just as the kettle on, and I said always. Which was enough. I didn't tell her that the pantry was still half empty. Or that I'd been sleeping with the closet door open because it made the room feel less like a room and more like a breath. I didn't need to. She knew. There was a new journal on the nightstand. Leather. Uncreased. I hadn't written in it yet. Because I was still learning how to live a life that didn't require proof. No tracking timelines. No comparing alibis. No wondering if the truth would ever surface on its own. Just one woman in one room with nothing to fix but her own breath. And that was finally enough. Tomorrow I'd speak out loud for the first time. Not to him. Not even for him. But for me. They told me the segment would be short. 10 minutes, maybe 12. Just a feature. A quiet story for a Sunday audience. But truth doesn't check the clock. It arrives when it's ready, and this time I was ready too. The show was called She Rises. Soft colors. Warm tones. Audience of women who looked like me, tired, beautiful, brave without trying to be. The host smiled the moment I stepped on stage. Not the kind of smile you use to sell products. The kind that says, you're safe here. We didn't start with the betrayal, we started with the beginning. What made you stay? She asked gently. I looked at the floor, then back at her. I thought love meant endurance, I said. But sometimes what you're enduring is the absence of love. The room went still, not heavy, just listening. Then she asked the question that cracked something open. What would you say to the version of you who waited too long? I blinked. I saw her. The woman in the blue velvet dress. Fork in hand, hope in both eyes. Waiting. I wasn't weak, I said quietly. I was still hoping. But hope without truth is a leash. Someone in the second row covered her mouth. The host didn't speak. She just nodded. Let it land. The producer held up a hand. 2 minutes left. She leaned forward one last time. And now she said, what does your life look like without him? I smiled. Not the polite kind, the real one. It's mine, I said. All of it. Every morning that starts quiet, every evening that ends in peace. No one to impress, no one to edit myself for. Just me. And that's enough. The applause didn't erupt, it rose slowly. Like recognition, like healing out loud. They aired the segment that night. And by morning I wasn't just the woman who left. I was the voice thousands of women had been waiting for. By the time I made it back to my apartment, my phone was glowing like a lighthouse. Missed calls. Hundreds of notifications. Messages from women I'd never met but somehow knew intimately. The clip had gone viral. A single line was everywhere: hope without truth is a leash. It was stitched into reels, captioned over black and white footage typed out in posts from women with usernames like @MomOf3Healing, @DivorceAft40 Reels, @SilentNoMore. I read them in silence. One hand holding a cup of chamomile, the other scrolling through what felt like a collective exhale. I didn't leave him. But today I told my best friend the truth. I'm still with him. But now I know I'm not crazy. I waited too long. But I'm still here, and that matters. My voice, the one I'd spent years softening, shrinking, editing, had landed in living rooms I'd never stepped into, in hearts that had forgotten what steady sounded like. Naomi texted me around midnight. No emojis. Just this was never about going viral. But maybe. The truth needed an audience. I turned my phone over. Let the screen go dark. Saturday, back into the couch I'd picked out by myself. Every cushion the color of calm. The kind of calm that can't be faked. I looked around at my apartment. No framed wedding photos. No reminders of the man who once told me I overreacted to everything. Just books. Lamps with soft bulbs. A tea kettle that didn't whistle just hummed when it was ready. No drama, no performance. No gaslighting. Only clarity. Only air that finally felt like mine. I opened the window. The autumn breeze swept in, carried the scent of leaves and freedom. And somewhere on another screen Logan was probably watching too. Let him. Let him see what dignity looks like when it's no longer bending itself around his silence. He got freedom. But I got the truth, and this time with receipts. Naomi's house smelled like rosemary and rain. The garden tucked behind her wraparound porch had grown wilder since summer, but more beautiful too, unruly in a way that felt earned. She handed me a pair of pruning shears like it was sacred. No interviews here, she said. No tags, no captions. Just you. I didn't speak, didn't need to. My hands found the lavender stalks first. Bent with late bloom, tired but still standing. I used to think healing was loud, I said softly. Like a declaration. A big cinematic ending. But it's not. Naomi didn't interrupt. She just sat on the bench nearby, knees pulled up, mug in hand. It's in the way I water my plants now. I continued clipping dead stems with care. It's how I fold my laundry while humming. It's not checking his Instagram anymore. It's silence that isn't empty. The shears made a quiet snip, then another. Each sound a boundary. Each cut a sentence I never needed to say out loud. I used to ask myself, I whispered, how did I let it get that far? But now I ask, what helped me come back? Naomi glanced at me. You did, she said. And you stayed soft even when it would have been easier to harden. We sat in stillness for a while. The sun dipped lower. The garden hummed with bees and the distant thrum of life going on. There was no soundtrack, no applause. Just the weight of something real returning to my chest. Breath. My own name. A life not waiting on anyone else to validate it. I stood up. Wiped my palms on my jeans. I think I'll plant something new here next spring, I said. Naomi smiled. What kind? I didn't know. And I didn't need to. Because the ground felt ready. And so did I. No more mirrors. No more stage. Just a woman in a garden choosing what stays and what gets pruned. That night I didn't post. Didn't scroll. Didn't even plug in my phone. Instead, I made a cup of vanilla rooibos, turned off every overhead light, and let the string of warm bulbs above my bookshelf be the only thing glowing. The apartment held its quiet the way my old house never could. Their silence was waiting for the next apology. Here silence was mine. I lay on the couch wrapped in a navy blanket, feet tucked under, watching the steam from my tea dance like breath. Then it buzzed, not loud, just enough. A message from Naomi. They aired it. I blinked. Set the mug down. Opened the link. It was the clip from She Rises. The one I'd already forgotten I'd given them permission to use. The host asked, what would you say to the version of you who waited too long? And there I was on screen in soft light, wearing the earrings I'd bought myself, not for a man but for the version of me who finally stayed. I watched myself speak. I wasn't weak. I was still hoping. But hope without truth is a leash. And I took mine off the day I chose to stop explaining what I deserved. I paused the clip. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't need to relive it again. It had already done what it came to do. The comments were pouring in. I've never felt so seen. She didn't raise her voice, she raised the standard. This is what strength looks like after 40. I didn't reply. Didn't retweet. Didn't screenshot for memories. I just smiled. Not the smile I wore when Logan walked into rooms. Not the one I practiced in mirrors when pretending we were fine. This one was smaller, but real. It held no permission. No apology, just breath. The next morning I stood in Naomi's garden again. Pruning shears in one hand, a small terracotta pot in the other. In it a sprout. Barely an inch high, but green. And mine. Naomi looked at me. New beginning, I nodded. No hashtags, no captions, I whispered. Just roots. We placed it beside the lavender. The same one I trimmed weeks ago. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was rebuilding. I felt like I was beginning. I forgave myself for staying too long. I thanked myself for leaving in time. And now I grow things again. I didn't post the clip, but somehow it found its way into the hands of women who needed it. They said I looked calm, poised, strong. But they didn't see the nights I spent curled on the bathroom floor, not crying, just trying to remember who I used to be before I learned to live quietly beside a man who had stopped seeing me. Strength, I've learned, is not always loud. It doesn't slam doors. It doesn't raise its voice. Sometimes it just keeps breathing through the worst of it until the day it realizes it doesn't have to anymore. When the talk show host asked, "What would you say to the version of you who waited too long?" I looked at the camera. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't flinch. She wasn't weak, I said. She was still hoping. But hope without truth is a leash. And I finally stopped letting it pull me back. That clip, just 23 seconds, traveled faster than anything I ever posted in 10 years of marriage. Thousands of comments. Women saying they saw themselves in my voice. Others asking how I knew when it was time to leave. But the truth is, I didn't know. Not really. I just knew I couldn't keep shrinking. That night, Naomi called. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't ask anything at all. She said, "Your voice came through V. The whole room heard you." And for once, I didn't doubt it. It's strange, isn't it? You spend years trying to be quiet enough, soft enough for someone to love you again, only to realize you were never the one who went silent. He was. He stopped asking. He stopped choosing. And in the absence of his attention, I filled the silence with sacrifice. Hoping he'd notice. Hoping he'd remember what I meant to him. But memory isn't love. It's just a ghost that sometimes knocks when you're trying to sleep. So I let the ghost go. And now, in a quiet apartment filled with books and jasmine tea and no perfume I don't recognize, I finally understand peace doesn't ask for permission. It comes when you stop asking why he left and start asking why you stayed so long after he did. There's a kind of grief that comes with being forgotten while still present. It doesn't scream. It doesn't wail. It folds napkins, plates untouched, and still lights candles on a table set for two. If that was you, if you've ever waited for someone who stopped arriving long ago, this part is for you. You are not weak. You are not invisible. You are not foolish for having loved someone completely. The world tells us to leave the second things get hard. But some of us, we stay because we believe in repair, because we believe love is worth the work. And sometimes it is. But not alone. You can't carry a relationship with both hands tied behind your back. You can't heal a wound that someone keeps reopening every time you find your footing. What I've learned slowly, painfully, gently is that letting go is not giving up. It's giving space for something truer to begin. Even if that truth is quieter. Even if it starts with just sleeping through the night. Naomi once told me, "You don't owe anyone the version of yourself that forgot how to dream." At the time, I didn't understand. But now when I wake up to silence that isn't painful, when I make coffee just for me, I know what she meant. It's not about forgetting what he did. It's about remembering who you are. These days I don't need to tell the whole story. I just keep a pair of gardening gloves near the back door. There's a rosemary bush I'm coaxing back to life. It was wilted, brittle. Everyone thought it was too far gone. But all it needed was time and care. And someone who didn't give up after the first frost. That's what healing looks like. It's not glamorous. It's not always viral. It's a plant that needs trimming. A heart that needs quiet. A voice that finally learns to speak not for survival but for clarity. So, if this story found its way to your screen and you feel something stir in your chest, maybe it's not just a story. Maybe it's a reminder. You're not alone. And no, you're not too late. You are just waiting for the light to change. If you'd like, share your story in the comments. There's room for it here. And thank you for sitting with me this long. In a world where so much breaks, I hope you find the kind of stillness that holds you instead of asking you to disappear, because now, I grow things again. And I hope you do too.